A few announcements. And the first one is that because of the Kushiti Garba Dharma Assembly, we actually paused our actual classes, but we will resume our regular classes from Monday, so Monday, Tuesday, and then there's no class on Wednesday. Thursday and Friday, we will have Uttara Tantra Shastra, which then will be also simultaneously translated to Korean language on top of Japanese and English. On Saturday evening, we will then have the Confucius Analects. I have to make announcements again because I know that there are people who tend to be more forgetful when it comes to the classes, especially when it comes to the Analects of Confucius. Many people used to feel that Buddhism is more onto the spiritual life. And when it comes to secular life and how to deal with this world and society, then Christianity and Confucian is probably more suitable. But Buddhism is more towards the emptiness aspect and so on. In fact, when it comes to Mahayana thinking, I think people would be able to see more of the teaching and how to apply the teachings into the secular life's aspect. And I think we can then also contemplate on the traditional culture, such as the traditional teachings that's passed down from Confucius Analects. And especially if we can combine the teachings of the traditional classics and Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, then it may provide some insights and some guidelines to you. The Analects of Confucius is quite well known internationally. And many people have different perspective on the teaching from this text. And when we're studying it, I really hope that we can have the first day of studying it and we can then end it well and have the last day of teaching. So this is really my requirement for those of you who want to listen to the class. I really encourage you to then start the first class and listen all the way till the end, till the last class. In fact, from what I notice is that majority of people indeed they consistently listened from the first class to the last class, including Vimalakirti Sutra as well as Uttara Shastra, Uttara Tantra Shastra. I think majority of people feel that is what success means, or what progress means and growth means is mostly on materialistic accumulation. In fact, I really feel the true growth is the spiritual growth, is the kind of growth that you can develop from inside out, the kind of challenge and the kind of growth that you can develop for yourself, because you definitely need to continuously to study and continuously to challenge yourself and to then become better. So in that way, you'll be able to grow. So you have to contemplate beforehand to investigate the reasons why you want to listen to it and your interest and investigate how much you want to persevere all the way till the end. But I'm sure at the end, if you finish the study, I'm sure you'll gain something much more than those of you who didn't. Another thing I would like to say is that a mother of Kempo from Doma Monastery, her name is Yangjip, and she recently passed away. And I really want to call up on those of you who then. So today I would ask you to then chant the mantra for her, including lots of the sentient beings who made great connections, or rather created adversities for us before. Lots of those sentient beings also passed away during this period of time. I am asking you to chant the 6 syllables mantra for all of them for 108 times. And then people requested me to give you the oral transmission of the Wisdom Warrior Manjushri composed by Pongso Rinpoche. Blessings, that's like the Amrita. I was supposed to give you empowerments before give you this oral transmission, but anyhow, I will give you the oral transmission. That was the oral transmission of the Wisdom Warrior of Manjushri. So for those of you who want to have more wisdom, then you should practice according to this sadhana. I've translated it before, and you can chant Om Marapasanada, which is the mantra of Manjushri. Especially, we really need to rely on Manjushri in order to fully blossom our own wisdom. Especially for those youngsters, for those children, they should chant Manjushri's mantra often. And if they can do so, then their wisdom will be definitely very uncommon. So that's the oral transmission I gave you today. Today, the teaching is on the Pith instruction on secular life and spiritual practice, on how to balance in these two aspects. In Tibetan Buddhism, where there was a great master who then gave lots of teachings in terms of how to deal with secular life, how to work with interpersonal and intrapersonal kind of relationships, and how to work with others, how to blend into community, and so on. So I'll give you a short teaching based on his text, and later on maybe I can give you this full text that's composed by this master. In Tibetan Buddhism, in fact, we talk a lot about the spiritual practice, such as practice on emptiness, practice on bodhicitta, practice on renunciate mind. So there are lots of Pith instructions on those aspects. In fact, of course, the sole purpose of Buddhism, or the essence of it, is not to gain any wealth, is not to gain any fame, is not to gain any health. In fact, the most important is to gain liberation for self and all sentient beings. But before that, the teachings that's given to the Buddhists are in fact quite practical. Buddhism do not talk about to give up all secular life, including wealth, including relationship, including fame, including everything in this world, to abandon all of it. It's not like that at all. From a Buddhist point of view, in fact, the teachings of secular life is also very detailed and very profound. If we can study in this aspect as well, then it will give very practical help to our daily life and to give a guidance to how to live our life. There are things that we encounter as obstacles are the fruition of the previous karma. However, there are then the aspect of whatever happens in your life that you view as obstacles are rather derived from this world's habitual tendencies or your own habitual patterns, which are difficult for you to break through. So there are lots of suffering that's caused by such habitual patterns, such as when you're hungry, yes, you feel such hunger. When you are sick, you feel such suffering from illness. Some of such sufferings derived from this world, from this life. Some of such sufferings derived from the previous life's karma. And some of the sufferings derived from your habitual mentality of how you perceive all of such obstacles. There are people nowadays in this world, they cannot attain anything that they want to gain in this world, and they suffer a lot. And then, in terms of that, in fact, Buddhism talks quite a bit of how to work with such kind of suffering, and very clearly to give you a guideline of how to work with this. So I'm going to share some of these instructions with you, and to give you some of the teachings according to the Master, as well as some of my own perspectives. I understand that lots of the young people, they probably don't take such advice very seriously. But for the wise ones, they would then listen to the teachings given from the previous generation. In fact, the teachings that's passed down from the previous generation could be very helpful to the younger generation. So there are a few aspects. Let's talk about the first one. The first one talks about to be direct, honest. Nowadays, people think that to be direct, to be straightforward is extremely important. But the Master taught, if you are quite direct and honest, that's good. But if you are too straightforward, then in this degenerated age, then people would fool you just as the monkeys owned by the beggars. So you have to keep a balance. Therefore, it's quite important to have a balance between to be direct and indirect. It's quite important to keep a balance between those two. If you're too direct or too straightforward, then you might unintentionally hurt someone without even knowing. Or if you're being too indirect, and going around circles with your point, then it's very difficult for other people to understand, and it's very difficult for you to, in fact, succeed in what you want to accomplish. In the Sakya Pandita's Treasury of Good Advice, he said that some straightforward, dull people ruin themselves, and some bring destruction to others. Straight trees in the forest are sought out and cut, and straight arrows are used to kill others. So for those people who are rather foolish, they may hurt others as well as themselves, just as the street trees are sought out by people and then cut down and then make the trees into furnitures. So there are people who would go into the forest, they then want to find the straight trees so that they can then cut it off and then use the straight tree for building houses or furnitures and so on. Similarly, there are people who are straightforward, just like the straight trees. Then it's very easy for them to get hurt. In the Sakya Pandita's teaching, he also said that the conch that has auspicious spirals on it, but the straight arrow would hurt others. So although the spirals on the conch is very curvy, but people would take it as a sign for auspiciousness. So it's quite important to be straightforward when straightforwardness would bring benefit to self and others, and to not be so straightforward when it's not a good time to be straightforward, because that would bring harm to yourself and others. So you have to really then evaluate the situation. Because if you said something unintentionally and your straight words, your direct words may hurt others, and then other people may get hurt and remember that, and then later on you won't be welcomed by the other or even taken as enemy by the others. The young people nowadays, because they lack so much experiences of society, of how to work in a society, and then they thought being direct and honest is really good. Therefore, they would be very direct. They would express what they honestly feel, and then eventually their living space is getting narrowed because they are not welcomed by the whole community. And then at the end, they cannot blend into the community. All they can do is to open up online shops and work on their own. I'm not saying that people who open up online shops are not good people, but in fact, I'm just pointing out that there are people who only opening up the online shop because they cannot work with others and they do not want to work with others. But as practitioners, when you see other people, they don't want to see others. They are practitioners such as the kind of practitioners who only want to stay by themselves, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're good practitioners. Sometimes you need to be direct, but sometimes your speech and the kind of crowds that you face are rather sly. And in such circumstances, if you are the only one who's being honest, then it's hard to say what the outcome would be, and maybe you won't be able to gain any benefit from being honest.
然后呢然后呢，我们就是降到这个就是说话方面，就是说
And
话
then
方
in
面的话
terms
呢，
of
一
speech,
般人来讲这个我们的有些人口才这个很
there are
好
people who
就
are
是
quite
这个能言
articulate,
善辩呐，就是
very
口才都是
eloquent.
非常这个超群的。当然，这个是非常非
That's
常
good.
好的。但如
But
果呢
when
就是在任何时候何时何地的话呢，
But
好像
at
这个
any
口者
time,
呢，
they
就
would
滔滔不绝，
speak out
就什么事
everything.
情都是夸夸其谈
They
的，一
would
直讲
talk
那
endlessly.
这样的话呢，很有
In
可
such a
能
way,
将自己的
then
内在的
they would
一切的话呢，就
expose
是比别人
everything
就是
inside
隐瞒
themselves
不
and
语，
their
就
inner
全部
thoughts,
呢就是带
all
在这个别人的
revealed
这个
to
面
the
前。
others.
那这样的话呢，就是实际上
In
就
such a
是
way,
并不是很好，就是因
the
此呢，
articulate
就是
or
在任何时候
eloquence
呢，
is
要
not a good thing
掌握这个
anymore.
说话的这个
Because
分
at
寸
any
啊。
time,
我
you need to
看
have a
有
balance
些
of
人的
what
话
to
呢，
say
确
and
实
what
是
not to say.
特别不爱说
There are
话
people who
就
really
是
don't like
守口
talking.
如瓶，就什么话
They're
都
very
是
quiet.
我们
They keep
我们
secrets
藏族有一
like
种说法
they
叫做
are
某个人
the
呢就像哑
closed
巴一样，就
bottles.
是这里面的
In
在口里的
Tibet,
语
we
言
say
呢，就
that
是用什么这个用什么粗口
someone
挖出来的话，
is
都是一句话
that
也挖不
there
出
are
来的。
people
就
who are
就
like
什么
mute, even
好
if
像
you
也有
use
一种说法叫做是嘴里装着石头一样的，就
some
是就
tools,
一直
you
是说话
cannot
说不出
dig
来，
any
就
word
像哑
out
巴
of
一样，
them.
这样也不是很好。
Of course,
但有
that
些
is
人的话呢，
too
就是一直是
extreme as well.
一直是讲
But there are
没有
people
问他，没
who
有说的话呢，一会儿说这个
continuously
人的过失，一会儿人
non-stop
说
talk
这个人的
non-stop.
这个公的，然后
Sometimes
全
they
世
would
界
say,
的
wow,
事情的话呢，就
someone's
是一直这个滔滔不绝的没完没了的
married
就
so
交代。
and so,
有
and
些
continuously
佛
to
教徒当中
articulate
也
in
是，
such a
因为
way.
旁边的人都是特别烦，很多人都是不想
And
跟他
people
交
don't
流，
want to
因为
listen
这个人
anymore
话
because it's
太
too
多了，
much,
特别啰嗦，对不
too
对？
much
这样的人
talking.
的话呢，实际上是他自己在说的时候呢，就是别人的旁边的是有些
And
人在笑你，有些人的是
During
特别
talking,
就是
during
这个
such kind of
讨厌
talking,
你啊，就是因为
then
你就一直
other
呢
people
就
around you
就
may
在这个
feel
说啊，所以
really
这样的话呢，
annoyed
实际上是这种
because
这
you
个说
continue
话
to talk
我
too
们经
much.
常实践认为的叫做什么，就是言多必失啊，就是如果
In
你说的
the
这个特
secular
别多
world,
的话
there's
呢，
a
那
saying
么可
that a
能
loose
带来就是
tongue
很
is a
多
source
这
of
个
evil.
不利啊，就是祸从口出，就很多就有意义的事
Lots
情，没
of
有
the
意义的事
valuable
情
things
要这个
are
说出。我都
then
认识的有一
expressed,
些
and lots of the
有一些喇嘛，
non-valuable
就是
things
我
are
都有时
also
候
expressed.
就
Some
很
lamas
害
I
怕，
knew
就是他，因为一直在旁边的话呢，没有问任何事情的是一直就是
are very articulate, and they
就一直就是
continuously
有
to
些事情
talk,
再重复再重复，一直
repeating
说
and
那这样的
repeating
话呢，
again
实
and
际上就
again.
是并不是这
In
个很
fact,
好的，
in
就是
such
这
a
样的话
way,
呢，
the
并不是
communication
很
is
好。
is
当
not
年那个
really
莲花生大师啊，
success.
就是离开这个藏地的时候呢，
When
他们有些教
Pamasambhava
员当中的话呢，
left
也是这个
Tibet,
说过啊，
he
就是对这
said
个君臣的有些书生教员里
give a
面的话呢，
teaching
没有必要
to
的
the
时
good
候呢，
king
尽
and
量
the
这
good
个
citizens.
少语
What
啊，
he
就是
taught
少
was
语
that
为妙。
it is the best
因为
to
我
speak
们有时候
less.
的话呢，就是可能
In fact, there are
大多
times,
数的这个
majority of
恩
times,
宠啊，就是也
the
是依靠语言带来的。马可仁波切在那个
the kindness
这个
of
军规教育当
others,
中
or how
专
you
门
feel about
讲
others,
了
or the
这个
enemy
语
that
言
you
品
would
啊，就是这个语
create
言品当中
the
呢，就是
friends
讲
and
到我
foe
们
are
有必要
created
的
by
时候
our
呢，
language.
需要这个说出来，因为有些事情呢，你没有说出来，
There are things that you
根
should
本不是真
express,
相。
because if you don't
但
express
是没有
yourself,
必要的时候
then
呢，
you should
那这个
definitely express
不
it.
应该
But when
说
it's
出
not
那么
necessary,
该说和
you
不该
should
说的
not
这个
say it at
分
all.
寸呢，就是
But
自
how
己
do
应
you
该
keep a
掌握。
how do you
当然
keep
这
a
个是需
balance?
要有一个
In
说话
fact,
的
you
这个技巧，
definitely need some
也要就
skills,
是掌
skillful
握呢
means of
他
how
的
to
这
use
个
your speech,
说话的这
and
种
you should
有必要说还是没有必要说。
also evaluate
自己呢
is it
应该
necessary to
要
speak
用
out
通过
or
自己
not.
的智慧来
You have to have
分析啊
wisdom
就
to
这一点呢
analyze
我想我们现在人的话呢，有些人
the
根本就是不
circumstances
管
and
他自己啊
situation, whether
不
if
管
you
他自
should
己的语言太少
express
了
it.
那这种
There are
人呢，
people who
我建议
don't
呢
speak at
增
all.
加一些语
Then
言，让
you
他
should
输入一些这个
you
这
should
个
then
语言
increase the
就
level
存
of
在你
your
自己的心里
language
必要的
output.
时候呢，就是打开这
You
个
should then
口
first
门
of
就是
all
然后说
to
出这
have
句话
some
来，
kind
这
of
样也是可以的。
storage of
然后有一
language,
些人
and
的话
then
呢，就
whenever
一
it's
直是这个
necessary,
开关
then
是
you
一直
can
开着的，
you can
就是语言的开关
switch your language button on so that you will continue to speak out. And there are people whose button of speech is always on. Then you should really control your button so that you know when to switch it off.
最好自己来观察。
It is the best that you could then watch for yourself, to be aware of the kind of a situation yourself.
什么最上什么？
The other day, what did we learn from the 7 points of mind training?
哦，对，二正去上述，对吧？就是那个两种
It
这个
is
作
says
证的
that
这个
out
方法
of
当
the
中呢，
two
应该自己
witnesses
可能最清楚自己，就是所以
rely
你
on
看
the
就是该说
primary
还是
one.
不该说，就是没办法别人来就是给你这个
So
话语
you
权
have
你
to
自己
then
该说的时候呢，还是
differentiate
不该说的时候。
whether you
平
should
时呢
say it
我
or not.
建议
You
就是
should
特
be
别
the
啰嗦的
primary
还
one
是
to
少说
rely upon
特别
whether
就是
you
这个
need
话
to
语的人呢，
express
还
such
是
opinion
有
or
时候呢，
whether
就是
you
用几
should
句话的话呢，也是
say it or
有
not.
必要的，就是我们有时候讲考的时候，不过讲考的时候
During the
还
oral
是该说的
exam,
应该
I think
说
it's
但是
quite
有些
important
人呢
to
讲考的
speak
时候也
out.
是一直吐不出来。
There are people who, during their oral exams, they just humming and just mumbling, and
反正有很多这个话说不出来。
lots of speech
可能有些
seems
是
to
可能
be
跟自己的
stuck.
这种这个就可能牵涉的
Maybe that's part of the karmic fruition, or maybe it's because you didn't really exercise enough.
在我们这个实践当中
Language, speech is important, one of the most important tools during our communication. West or the East,
性是什么样，这个人的行为是什么样。
you
一
can
般的人
then
很多这个非常有智慧的人呢，
majority of people
以前是跟
rely
这个
upon
人
speech to express and to
什
communicate
么都不
with
知道，就是
others.
他怎么是这样。但通过跟他交往一段时间之后呢，
You
有智
have
慧
to
的人基
then
本上是观察出这个人的这个智慧的深
be
度。
aware of the
他的
other
这个人
person's
品的这个
speech,
善
the
良
other person's
或者是
action,
这个人的
and
办
then
事
you'll be
的
able
这
to
个能力啊。
differentiate
当然
if,
极个
if
别
this
人的时候
person
呢依然
is
是讲得特别
very
这个
smart,
精
if
彩，但
he's
是实际上
wise,
如实
if
呢
he's
可能不会
very
有这样。
reliable
除了
or
极个
not.
别的这种
All
现
of
象以外
these
的话，
are
它都是
depending
靠
on
这
the
个经验来
speech.
对你他
And
的
from the
性
speech,
和
you'll
他
be
的
able
行为。
to
所以呢，
then
就我们平时在那个
logically
说
or
话过程
to
当中呢，也要就是自己
see
观
the
察自己吧，
person's true
观察自
nature
己。
in some ways. So we should investigate.接下来呢，我们就是要分析一下我们这个 Next
一般
one,
做人的时候呢，
let's
有些人是非常的这个高
talk
调，
about
有
lots
些
of
人呢就是
people
很低
who
调啊。
are
当然
who
这个
keep
做
a
人呢
high profile, and there are people who
是
keep a rather low
非常这
profile.
个低调啊。
And people
深藏不
mostly
露啊
feel that keeping
这
a
样的
low
话呢，这个
profile
是
is
非常
very
好的。
good.
但是如果过于的，
But
就是
if
一些
you're
这
too
个
much on
低
the
调啊，
extreme
或
of
者是
keeping
沉
a
默
low
啊，
profile
这样的
and
话
being
呢，
silent
那么
most
任
of
何
the
人都
time,
是不知道
and
你
then
内在
majority
这
of
个智
people
慧。
won't be
就
able
像
to
是
see
暗
your
暗的
inner
就是
nature at
这
all,
种这
just
个涌
as
现的这种感觉
the
暗暗的这
just
个涌
as
现的感
the
觉的话呢，
spring
那么
that
就是没有人
gushes
去
out
知道，
very
就听不到这个人
silently,
过
then no one
所以
else
说
would
呢，
know
我
that
们这
there
个
is
人
the
呢
sweet
就是应该
spring
暴
that's
发
gushing
出
out,
这个外
and
显的
then the
明艳
water
的这样
won't be
的
of
政
any
策
use of
就
anyone.
是像
Similarly,
前
if
辈的
you're
这
too
些有些
quiet,
大德的
if
话
you're
呢，
keeping
确实
too
是他
too
们的
low
这
of a
个
profile,
成
then
就
you
呢，
won't be
就
able
有
to
这个超群
benefit
的这个
anyone.
境界，
Just
就
as
是
there were masters in the
超
past
凡入
who
圣的
had
这样的
great
境界。可
realization,
是呢，
who
因为
had
他
the
们就是喜
realization
欢
that
比较
surpassed
这
the
个激
mundane
进的，
world,
就
but
经常
because
呢
they
就不愿
prefer
意这个外
serenity,
露。这
because
样的
they
原因的话
prefer
呢，
being
他一辈
quiet,
子的这
because
种
they
学习
prefer
的
a low
境界的话
profile,
呢，就
and
少
then
有人这个要这个。最
very
后呢，跟诸
few
位呢，
people
也可
know
能
their
起不
inner
到这个很大的这
realization,
个
inner
作用。
wisdom,
所以
and
我
then
们这个
their
过
inner
于的一
wisdom
些
and
炫耀自己
realization
啊，
are
或
not
者到
of
处呢就是
too
给
much
自己
benefit to
就是
others.
宣传自己啊，这
On
样
the
的话呢，就有
contrary,
些
there
人
are
呢
people who
没有
barely have
这个
any
必要
inner
的。但是
realization and
过
inner
于的这
merit,
个
but
低
they
调，
would
过于的谦虚，
continuously to
过于的
propagate
这种
themselves.
这个
That's not good
话
either.
术啊、沉默啊，这样的话
Over
呢，
here, it
也
talks
许你
about
内
if
在当
you
中的话呢，就会
overly
攻克他们
protect your
啊，就是
own
学问，就是这个
you're overly to keep a low profile and not talking about any of the merit in yourself. In such a way, your wisdom and your merit can hardly benefit anyone around you. Then, according to Mahayana Buddhism, it taught that sometimes it's quite necessary to then honestly to show other people your inner realization. And in such a way, this is in fact quite reasonable. The Easterners usually feel that being humble and keeping a low key is a kind of a good characteristic. Lots of Buddhists, when they come to me, they would say that I am your foolish disciple. I'm sorry I made a mistake. I'm sorry I'm of no good to make any benefit to others. And when it comes to public kind of occasion that they were put on the spot and they had to give a speech, at that time they would say, I'm so sorry, I had to say something, but I'm not so confident about what I had to say. I'm not so familiar with what I have to speak. They're overly being too humble. In fact, in Tibetan Plateau as well as in mainland China, people, the general audience would view such kind of speaker as, oh, this person is very humble, that's a good person. This person is very honest, a very good person. But in the West, if you were to present yourself that way, then the Western audience would feel quite befuddled. If you're not that good, then why are you speaking at all? In the West, they emphasize on the point of being confident. And then at the first, they have to sell themselves and saying that I am quite proficient at what I do. And then I have to propagate what I have to say to you. And I'm very confident and I believe in what I'm teaching here. Young people nowadays are quite influenced by that. And young people are very easy to then give the to kind of sell themselves in such a way. And then when young people comes to such kind of circumstances, they would then say that, oh, I can tell you what I'm doing. I'm so confident in this project. I can work on this alone. I can fly. They would then sell themselves in such a way. And there are people would, after hearing such flattery, they would believe in such a young person. But two of these kind of examples are rather too much on the spectrum of extremes. Atisha's guru, the great Smriti-Jana, he came to Tibet and then intended to teach the Tibetan people, but his translator died halfway, and instead of propagating his teaching and instead of telling other people his merit, he worked as a servant for a poor family, and because of that, the Dharma activity of his was not propagated widely in Tibetan Plateau. And when Atisha heard such a story of how his guru passed away without giving any teachings, he cried and he said that, wow, there is no other Pandita like my guru. And after he arrived in Tibetan Plateau, he didn't benefit anyone, he didn't give any teachings to anyone, yet he passed away like this. So, according to the words of my perfect teacher, it says that it's quite sad that the great Panditas or great teachers who had lots of merit within but never had the opportunity to turn the wheel of Dharma, such as the great Smriti-Jana. Pontsokgo Rinpoche sometimes keep a very low profile, and sometimes in necessary circumstances he keeps rather high profile. back in 1986. There were about 20 or 30 cars following the whole train of the followers of Ponce Rinpoche, and at that time we had large speakers on top of the cars, and then there was promotions, and there was lots of such kind of high-key setup. And at that time, lots of the Tibetan people who had lots of devotion, and they would then prostrate, and they had lots of tears in their eyes. Of course, that's for people with lots of faith. But maybe people with rather a different mindset, they would feel quite repelled towards that kind of circumstances. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult to say. Anyhow, do not fall into any of the extremes. Too much of a low key or low profile, or too much of a high profile. It's rather heavy. The next one talks about how the worldly people, secular people, they would keep a clear boundary of friends versus foe. If this is my foe, then I would hate and retaliate my foe. And if the other person is my friend, I would be very kind and show lots of loving kindness towards my friends. Of course, from the aspect of the secular rules, this is good to keep a clear differentiation of who's been nice to you and who's created lots of obstacles to you. However, if you unnecessarily created lots of anger and aggression in your own mind in such a way, it would hurt many people. And maybe you'll end up just as the dog that guards the gate. People nowadays tend to have great aggression towards the ones who are considered as bad people in this society. And in Tibet, we say there are old dogs in Tibet who lives for only 9 years, but within the short period of time of their life, they created lots of negative connection and created lots of anger towards different people. In order to guard the dogs, in order to guard his owner's gate, he offended or he harmed lots of other people and created lots of unnecessary aggression towards other people. So do not then lash out your anger out of no reason often. There are people who didn't create lots of problems, then they still feel rather have lots of. There are people who have a rather lots of aggression in their mind. Then whomsoever they view, they see them as people with great aggression and anger. And then they create such kind of anger between this two people's connection. And for people who have a rather kind and very gentle heart, then whenever you view others, you will view others with lots of kindness and gentleness.
非常的这个怯懦，可能这样认为的。但实际
Do
上
not
呢，
think this
就
is
像孟子
a
所说
weak
的，
way of
人之
living
无
your
敌
life.
就是人爱的人呢，
But
没有敌人。
according to
在这个
Confucius,
世界上呢，
according to
就
Mencius,
对
he
他而言
said
的话呢，
that
全部
the
都是他
kind
的这个
person
朋友。
doesn't have
其
any
实
enemy.
我们如果真正
If
是
you
能
are
做
a
到
kind
大乘佛
person,
教里面所讲到的也
if
好，
you could
或者
live
是
your
前辈的这
life
些智者
as a
所
Mahayana
做到的，
practitioner,
人之无敌，就人之无敌。
then you will
这
be
样的
able
话呢，
to
应该是很好
then
的。
live
有些
in
人
this
呢，可能
world
就
happily
像
without any
这
enemy
个什么
because you have a
就
kind
是
heart.
吉田菩萨所说的
According
那
to
样，其实
Shantideva,
他害你的话呢，
he
他
said
并不
that
是无缘无故的，就是可能
people
他
who
有
created
前世
harm
的
to
一些
you
这
or
个业
create
缘在里面。
obstacles
或者
to
的话
you,
呢，就是
it is
他的这
out
种
of
这个
it is
烦恼
not
这个在
of
驱使下，烦恼的
out
驱
of
使下，
no
他也不
reason.
会有自主。
Sometimes
所以
it's
我
because
们
of
这
your
样的话呢，
previous
就
karmic
应该是很
connection,
理解的。
and
可以说一
sometimes
个
it's
人就是
because
无缘无
the
故
other
的
person
害
also
我，
is
我
suffering
对他
from
特别特别好，
affliction.
但是呢，他就无缘无
You
故
may
的害
view the
害
other
我的时候
person
呢，
as
那我
creating problems
按
and
照时间
obstacles
法的
to
话呢，
you
就是
out
那
of
人
no
不犯我，
reason.
我不犯人，就是人如果犯我，我必杀人。
According to the
可能这样。
secular way
但是
of
实际上
viewing
呢，
it, you
我们
would
这
say
个
that
这个如果大乘
if
佛
you
教
do
的
not
观
harm
念
me,
的
I
话呢，
won't
就是
harm
人如
you.
果
But
犯
if
的
you
话呢，
harm
我也
me,
从
I
很多
would
方面考虑，
then
他也许是这个他的这个
return
烦
an
恼
eye
的
for
驱
an
使下
eye.
就是所造成的，也许是我自己就是认为是我自己没有错，但是
Sometimes
确
you
实
feel
是
that
我
I've
对
never
他
done
有
anything
很大的这
wrong.
个伤害。从很多方面
But
来理
maybe
解
you
的话呢，
have,
自相
maybe
续
you
当中的这
had.
个长恨心呢，就是也会这个消失，然后对他呢，
But if
出
you
现
could
这种
develop
这
a
种办法。
kindness
其实我
and
们
a
人生
sense of
当中呢，
gentleness
不能
towards
这个
yourself and
过于
others,
盲点，就是
then
这
in
叫
such a
无
way
忌
you'll be
口
able to
啊。
see
我们有时候可能就是
that
特别爱，就是爱
that
的
you
就
and
没
the
办
other
法
person
要
also
这
had
个死
reasons.
有
And
时
in
候呢，
such
就
a
是
way
特别
you
特别
will be
恨，
able to
恨的呢，
pacify such
没办法
anger.
的，也是非常的这个憎恨呐，就是一直是要
Anger
么这个
is
杀你，要
on
么杀
the
我。就是现在很多
extreme
世间人
end
的这
of
种
the
这个做法的
spectrum,
话呢，
so
就
you
是非
should
常这个极
really
端
keep
啊，
a
有些
balance
这个
rather than
像
maintain
某
such
某还是什么，就是
extreme
有一个
mentality.
这个小说家，就是他的有一些书里面
Somerset
呢，就是
Mom,
讲到是我们这个平凡的这个
he
人
said
生啊，
that
平凡的人生的话呢，就
in
是这
our
是一个非
ordinary
常
life,
巨的这个伟大，就是其
if
实
we can
人
live
就是不
our
能过
ordinary
于的这
life
种这个啊，好
humbly,
快
then
乐
this
啊，
is
就让
an
超
ordinary
超我的思想飞
greatness
起来了，
or
就是这样，
ordinary
听着好痛
extraordinariness.
苦啊，就是然后自己
Nowadays,
钻到地里面
people
去
are
一
too
样。
much on the
其实这
extreme.
两
When
个
they're
不是
happy,
一
they
个
feel,
这个
I
极端。
am
我们
so
人生当
very
中苦的
extremely
话呢，
happy.
可
And
以
when
苦不了
they're
多少，
sad, they feel
然后
that they're
乐的
so
话呢，就是
extremely
乐也
sad.
乐不了多少。
In
爱的
fact,
话呢，
in
就是爱
this
也爱不了多少，就是再怎
lifetime,
么样也是
your
随着爱
happiness
的这
won't
个改
last
变。
that long,
然后
and
恨
your
的话
love
呢，
won't last
再怎
that
么恨的
long.
话呢，就是
Your
其实
hatred
是
won't
没有
last
这个
that
必要
long.
的。因此，人生当中
Therefore,
的很多的这个问题呢，
many of
在
the
这里讲
problems and
张五分成
obstacles
啊，就是今
in
天我讲
this
的内
life,
容的话呢，
we
就
should
主
deal
要是张五
with
分
them
成，不能
with a sense
过
of
于的，就
balance.
是这两
We
个
should
人
not
生做任何事情，
overreact.
如果
We
多
should
到两点
not
的话，那就是对自己带
react
来
with
对他人的
great
话呢，也是带来
extreme.
就是更多的一些这个痛苦。就是这一点
Otherwise,
的
you
话呢，
would
我们
bring
可能就是要去
afflictions
观
to
察，
yourself
观
as
察。
well as others.
然后的话呢，就是我们平时
That's something
这
that
样
you
的
need
这
to
个软饮
contemplate
适度啊，
upon.
就是比
The
较
next
这
one
个
then
该
talks
软的时候
about
软一点，该硬的时候就软
gentleness
硬一
or
点。那平时
nice,
我们这
being
个说话
nice,
呢，就是也
and
非常的
being
这个语言就是很温和，
rather
然后心里呢就是也特别这
very
个善良。当然这样是特别好的。
confident.
但是在这个时代啊，
You should
就是很多好
balance
人呢，
this
就是
too.
被说到就是
It's good
气势，
that you
很
have
多坏
nice
人的话呢，
language,
就
that
是
you're
人不
soft
信赖，
spoken,
这
that
样的
you're
一个时代。
easygoing.
如果
But
过于
this,
的这
in
个
this
善
era,
良
if
软弱
you're
的话呢，
too
就是人们对
easygoing,
你就是看
to
着
the
特别
extent
这个
that
气势
people
啊，
would
劣势啊，
feel
有这个
that
可能
you're
性。
too
所以
meek
呢，
or
我们在不
agreeable,
同的场合
then
当中
other
一定
people
要这
would
个软饮适度
uh,
啊，就不能
take
太软，
advantage of
也不
you.
能太硬嘛。
So you should
如果
not
太软
be
了的话呢，就是
so
那你就
difficult to deal with.
都没有啊。说如果你脖子上的东西是什么？
What is it
啊？
in your neck?
什么东西？啊？发往珠宝的还有佛的像，这个干嘛？
What is it for? With Pontsog Rinpoche's image and Buddha's image, the child answers, it could help me, could protect me.
能保护吗？
Can it really
怎么保护？
protect you? How?
你有信心吗？
Do you have faith? The child answered, yes. That's very good.
还有没有其他作用？
Any other functions of your necklace? The child answered, I don't know.
不知道是吧？好吧。
Okay, so you don't know.
很好。
Okay, that's good.
这样的，我刚才说。
Anyhow, I was saying that at any time you should not be too difficult,
也可能不一定就是特别。
because being too difficult,
有些人特别。
it is not easy to blend into this community. Lots of people who are very difficult to deal
有
with.
些事情的话，那就是你并不是依靠这个强硬的。
In fact, many of the things cannot be dealt with through a difficult attitude.
别人的这种这个气势。
Nor you could be too easygoing or too meek or agreeable. Otherwise, people would treat you as nothing. Lots of practitioners, they would feel that, okay, I'm a practitioner, I practice bodhicitta, therefore I should be kind, therefore I should then be very patient. And if you continuously to keep such a kind of attitude, then other people would step on your head. And you won't be able to accomplish anything in this world. In terms of practice, you can keep a kind heart, but you cannot be soft all the time to others. According to metaphorical models of water and tree, it is said that being too meek and agreeable at a wrong time in the age of degeneration, one is easily taken advantage of. Cotton is known for its softness. No wonder people use it for cushions. This is quite timely, isn't it? In fact, very applicable. There are people in the meetings who have a very soft speech, and after that person finished speaking, no one wants to then respond or answer. And there are people who are very difficult to, in terms of speaking, and very and very aggressive in terms of their speech, and then people would have to then respond to him. Otherwise, he won't let other people go very easily. That is not good either. So you should not be so soft that people would step on your head or use such kind of soft. Take advantage of such kind of soft people. Others may say that you have taken the bodhisattva vow, therefore you should be very nice to me. But that's not necessarily beneficial to others. Whatever you need to do, you need to do. You need to do what need to be done, and you need to choose the right thing to. You need to choose the right thing to do. Practicing bodhicitta is different than being meek and agreeable to everyone. It's different than being nice. If you're being too lazy, as a practitioner, you won't gain any benefit from the transmundane practice or spiritual practice, and you won't be able to gain respect from the secular world either. Therefore, practitioners should follow the rules of this world, the secular world. This is quite necessary. So it talks about aggressiveness and being nice. You should not be too much on either of the extremes, otherwise you will be taken advantage of, and whatever you do won't get accomplished. In this world, people really look into the capacity or capability of others. If you have great capability, then people would respect you. Otherwise, people would then not respect you at all. Therefore, it's quite necessary to that sometimes be a bit aggressive to stand up for yourself. Sometimes I think practitioners are a little bit too nice, too soft. It is necessary for the practitioners to show your ability, to show your personality, your characteristic, to show what you're good at, to show your advantages. So, yes, Buddhism is about holding compassion and kindness. But when facing other religions, there are religions who are very aggressive, and other people do not dare to do anything negative to them. But because Buddhists are too nice and too kind, whatever people do to you, you won't retaliate. And then people would further take advantage of you. Therefore, in order to avoid such a situation, during necessary times, then Buddhists could retaliate and could be aggressive. This is also taught by the Buddha. Next one then talks about wealth. How about wealth? Is it necessary, or is it reasonable for Buddhists or for practitioners to accumulate wealth then? It is good to have, it is good to be devoid of any desire for wealth. However, people nowadays, in this era, the beggars are not being respected. But the dogs of rich people are respected. Therefore, to accumulate some wealth is necessary from time to time. Yes, according to Hinayana practice, it says that it's quite important to then get rid of any of the desire, especially desire for wealth. And the practitioners should then humbly, to live in circumstances that is then devoid of much of the desire for wealth. According to Yogacara Bhumi Shastra, it says that if bodhisattvas learn and acquire the skill in various worldly craftsmanship, they can collect a great amount of wealth with little effort for the benefit of sentient beings. What does that mean? It means that if bodhisattvas could study the worldly craftsmanship, then even if they spend only a little bit of effort, they will be able to earn great wealth, great amount of wealth. But earning such a great amount of wealth is not to benefit self, but to benefit others. There are people nowadays that they continuously to work for wealth, for benefit. But the way that they accumulated the wealth is to really just hoarding it and not to utilize that to benefit anyone. I've met lots of successful people. They talk a lot about earning money to gain wealth. But the reason they accumulate wealth is rather very narrow-minded. The only reason they want to accumulate wealth is to then benefit the very small amount of people or very small group of people around them. So for the great bodhisattvas, for the Mahayana practitioners, you should accumulate wealth in order to benefit sentient beings. If you have no money, if you have not even a penny on you, it is so difficult to live in this world for even one more minute. Of course, over here it talks about the great bodhisattvas, but for the ordained practitioners, then you should practice according to the Vinaya. However, for the lay practitioners, you should take this teaching to your heart. You should not just then give up all the desire to earn any wealth, and then whatever little bit you earn, you would donate it to others. And in such a way, you don't accumulate any wealth, and you'll be looked down at by your family members or by the society. Yes, at that moment, you probably have some kind of mind of renunciation. But later on, at a certain moment, you have nothing. You have no wealth, you have no family and friends, and then you have no practice, you have nothing. Maybe at a certain point, you had everything, and then because of such a kind of wrong view, then you lose everything. So, a good amount of wealth, to accumulate appropriate amount of wealth, that's not too much, not too little, then you'll be able to have some wealth that you'll be able to then offer to make offering and to make donations. Then you will live rather comfortably. Of course, making offering most of the time, the best offering is offering of Dharma. The next one talks about people with or without the capacity of making money. You should not be the kind of merchant who sells less than what they advertise for. If everyone is pursuing for their own benefit and their profit, then it could bring great harm to self and others. So as a good man, as a righteous man, a person should then earn their living honestly, according to Da Xue, the classical, where it says that the most important, the essence of business is to maintain the virtue. But the wealth or the profit that accumulated from such business is the outcome or the side effects. Therefore, people should not pursue the side effect and forget about the essence of the business. So during running a business, you should not then have any of the conduct that is in violation of creating virtuous dharma. Otherwise, you won't be able to gain benefit nor accumulate the essence of the business, which is virtue. According to Sigalovada Sutra, it talks about how it talks about how important wealth is, or accumulation of wealth is, but when it comes to accumulation of wealth in a non-virtuous way, that is then forbidden by the Buddha. To follow the rules in running the business is extremely important. There are people who then overly look for wealth and do not care about their living standard at all. In Thailand, in many places in this world, maybe they do not have lots of wealth, but people want to maintain a certain standard of their living to at least then live well, live a good life. Just as in Europe, there are people who save up and so that they can take a long winter vacation. Unlike many of the Chinese who would accumulate wealth non-stop until the day they receive the certificate of cancer or notification of cancer. in the city of Chongqing, someone told me that he continuously to work until 60 years old, and then he got the notification of cancer. At that time, when he then spent after he spent all his money in treatment, he realized he lost all the wealth that he accumulated throughout his whole life just to treat the cancer that he gained through working tirelessly throughout his whole life. So it's quite a paradox. Solely search for wealth is in fact quite dangerous and quite fearful. In the records of the great historian of China, it says that if each individual only considers about one's own benefit, then the world is in danger. If everyone only cares about money, then this world is in danger. Majority of people then, including the officials, including the teachers, including the workers, everyone is aiming for money, for wealth, including the East and the West. The Westerners, whenever they talk about money, their attitude would change, their tone would change. When it comes to money, when it comes to money, it really hurts the previous friendship or any relationship. So it's quite important to gain wealth virtuously and to maintain wealth with virtue. The next one then talks about it is good to be good at wealth management. However, if you're too stingy at maintaining wealth, then your friends and family would depart from you. You will be the only one who's guarding your wealth all by yourself. So it's quite important to keep a balance of making offering, making donation at the same time as doing your wealth management, being rather or saving up your wealth. Whatever salary you would receive, it is best that you keep a certain part of it, to keep a part of it with a certain percentage to donation, and keep a certain portion of it for yourself to use, and keep a certain portion to saving, and so on. According to a classical text called The Scholar, where it is said that a scholar at the time of his death, he saw that there were 2 candles lit, and he felt that why there are 2 candles? One is sufficient already, and then he couldn't close eyes even during his at the time of his death, because he is very stingy. He's a very stingy person, and placed lots of importance in maintaining wealth or saving his wealth. It is important to make offering when it's necessary, when you have the ability, and very necessary to then maintain your wealth by saving. The next one talks about it is good to have friends, because if you have more friends, then you'll be you create the social network. However, during all the friends, all the people you know, there are people who are quite malicious-minded. And by not distinguishing the good and the bad friends, then the bad friends may lead you into wrong destination, wrong path with their wrong views. And eventually you will follow his wrong path and fall into a rather dangerous destination. People out of their karma Maybe the karmic connection is like so, that you are quite intertwined in terms of the karmic connection with the others. But sometimes it is because of the lack of wisdom, lack of the lack of the analysis to distinguish whether your friend is a good friend or a bad friend. Nowadays, people who who are then infected with AIDS, or who got into gambling or drinking or drugs, are because of the luring of the friends, of the bad friends. Young children who recently then graduated from schools, from universities, and so on, when they first step into the society, they have no way to distinguish the right from the wrong, or the good and from the bad friends. According to the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra, where it stated that there are the wrong friends or bad friends who have wrong views, wrong conduct, malicious-minded, the kind of friends who may seem rather agreeable, but with a malicious mind. During Pomsa Rinpoche's time, there were some disciples who then showed themselves or expressed themselves in a way that they are agreeable. But and they may walk rather in a wobbly way because of the lack of energy. So they seem quite innocent, but when it comes to very important situations, and they would then strike to the point with their malicious mind, and then it would lead you to a rather dangerous situation. It is quite important to remember that if you do not make friends with wisdom, with the distinguishing the right from the wrong, then you could then be led into a rather difficult situation for yourself. We have a few more. The next one, it talks about the mood. It's very difficult to find people who are not wavered by hope and fear, by happiness and sadness. Not many people could do that. But if you can't do that, but if you're overly subjected to moodiness, then you will lose your friends and companions and your family members. If you tend to get very moody, then you could drive your families away. The 7 points of training the mind, if you remember, if you could recite it, it could be of great help to you. Sometimes the words are rather short, but the help could be great. If you are very moody, happy in one moment, and get saddened in the next moment, and get really aggressive all of a sudden out of no warning to anyone, then people would feel rather quite confused by your moodiness. In fact, myself had then noticed or watched other people's moodiness. Sometimes, yes, and there are things that trigger them to be angry or moody. And there are times it's only because people could get very angry or very moody because they are very sensitive, very fragile in their mind. Just as in Africa, there are the horses. Once they are bitten by the mosquito, they would get really wild and they would get very angry, and eventually they would die out of their own aggression. some things that's very small, like a mosquito bite, could trigger a strong animal such as a horse. It's only because the horse grasps onto such a small thing. And there are lots of things nowadays are really mere mistakes or misunderstandings. Recently, there was a news that a wife went to her husband's company and wanted to pick him up because it was raining outside. And then at the gate of his company, she saw that he was holding an umbrella with his coworker who was a woman. And then she right away, without saying anything, she then committed suicide. She felt that why that I give up so much to come all the way to give him an umbrella to shelter him from the rain, yet he is sheltering another woman. She didn't succeed in the suicide, which was saved from the great tragedy. But we should learn from such incidents because there are misunderstandings, and there are small things that maybe you feel quite sensitive to, but it is really unnecessarily. You're really unnecessarily enlarging such incidents to an extent that it harms you. What is practice? Practice is what is contemplating upon the teachings that make sense, that leads to the truth. It is not only by sitting and meditating. During meditating, you may be very serene, really happy, very peaceful. But after 3 hours of meditating with great serenity, even if you put a feather on top of his nose, the feather does not move at all. You enter into such kind of meditative samadhi. But out of the meditation, once you leave the meditation cushion, you started getting really aggressive and angry with everyone else. Then how can you say that you are a good practitioner? So it's quite important then to watch your own mind and to contemplate on the truth as taught. I think it is because of the media. Nowadays, people get really sensitive out of no reason, and it is mainly due to the influence of media. A group of entrepreneurs asked me what teaching I could give them as an advice. I said the best teaching I can give you is to then watch your mind often and know yourself. And during any kind of circumstances, do not waver so much. And then that's the best teaching and advice I can offer you. The next one, then it talks about even to the ones who are very trustworthy towards you, very trusting you, and who are your friends and who are your relatives and so on. If the person then would lie and take advantage of such trusting friends and relatives, they're just like stray dogs who do not know the good from the bad. Just as the stray dogs, if you feed them, they would feel suspicious of what you're feeding them, and if you're using a rock to hit them, then they would feel quite fearful and run away as well. So such kind of people is like the stray dogs. If you betray the ones who give you the best kind of trust, this kind of people are called the shameless ones. According to Buddhism, and according to the secular world's rules, it talks about the ones who give you lots of their trust, then you should not then betray them or lie to them. For the kind of people who are rather having bad personality or bad characteristics, who are not who are not of any integrity, they would purposely to harm and to betray or even make traps for the ones who know them. In Tibet, we say that you cannot find the thief who lives among your family, and you cannot then figure out who is the thief from, and the watchdog cannot differentiate the thief if the thief is your neighbor, because the neighbor would come over often, the dogs just lose guard. Similarly, if you harm and hurt your relatives and your friends who give you lots of trust, then you would be the kind of shameless kind of people, because those are the people who completely let down of their guards towards you, and you would harm them. The next one then talks about at the front and at the back, they're completely different. They are very two-faced. They would praise you at the front, and at your back, they would criticize you in front of others, just like the poisonous snake who has two tongues. One is white and one is black, and that is poisonous. There's a saying that in front of you they would offer warmth as if they were they would create such warmth like they just as if they are a pile of firewood, create a fire, and they would then criticize you just as they were made of knives. There are people who like to praise you in front of you, and maybe they would criticize you behind your back. Lots of people would say that you're so great, you're wonderful, and then after at the back, behind your back, they would then point at your back and say, just that person is terrible. So I would suggest that if you do not dare to criticize others in front of their face, do not criticize others behind their back. Otherwise, it really tells on your personality, or on your characteristics. The next one says that without hesitation, there are people who would then give you promises, and such kind of people would rarely follow up with their words, with actions. What it means is that for people who make easy promises, where they would say that, oh, no problem, I can do this right away. And when people say such things to me, I would not believe them. When I ask them to do something, they would say, oh, no problem, I can do it. I'm very trustworthy. I can do it, no problem. And through such kind of easy promises, then I feel it may not then turn out to be very successful, would not turn out to be a completion. And there are people who are rather quite hesitant. They would say that this is not good and that is not good. I can't do this. Sometimes I would think to myself, oh, you're so good at criticizing others, why don't you do it yourself? I think within this project, even if you do not do it at all, this world, this earth will continuously to function even without your presence. Today, our key topic is to maintain balance. So do not believe the ones who give easy promises, give cheap promises, because in such a way you won't be able to accomplish anything. And do not trust the ones who criticizes everything, but being very hesitant in making any promises, because in such a way nothing can be done properly either. Therefore, we need to learn how to maintain a balance. We need to develop wisdom so that we can differentiate and we can then keep a balance. The next one, then it talks about they have lots of thinking, lots of thoughts going on. When they continuously to have more and more ideas and more things would pile up. Therefore, it talks about we should not constantly create additions in our life, addition projects. According to the Shakya Pandita's treasury, it says that do not make promises very quickly, and once you make such promise, a wise one's promise would be like the kind of words that's carved onto rocks. In this era where there's an overflow of information on internet, you may get really inspired to do this and to do that, and then you have lots of things to do on your hands, but you have nothing to be focused on, and you have nothing that you can then work in depth. Unlike in the ancient times where people would have lots of the craftsmanship, they would only investigate. They would only invest their energy into one area, into one project. But from the other aspect or another perspective, it is that then it's very difficult to do so. Sometimes when I think to myself, this society has changed so much. In the past, if you're a worker, if you're a factory worker, you're a factory worker. If you're a farmer, you're a farmer. And then they would continuously to do only one thing in their lifetime. But nowadays, the society doesn't function in such a way. If a person may then work in one post or one kind of area for a very short period of time and change very swiftly, and then therefore they cannot then maintain to work in a steady post. So this is really a society's change and the kind of insecurity that brings to other people. And people would change many different job posts in a year of time. I think sometimes it comes with the merit. Different people have different merit. Sometimes it is then people's different wisdom, and sometimes it's the society. And the people would then continuously to save and save. After saving, they have nothing left in their bank account. And I'm not kidding about it. The next one, it says that do not be swayed by others' praise, and do not feel depressed when other people criticize you. Rather, you should then get even more brave and courageous to take stand for yourself. According to Shakya Pandita's Treasury of Good Advice, it says that not to be pleased by praise, nor displeased by criticism, and to maintain properly their good qualities. These are characteristics of noble people. unlike people nowadays who are so confident when they hear praises and compliment from others. And when they encounter any kind of obstacles and hardships, they would then completely fall into the ground and not able to stand up again ever again. In fact, this world is just illusory like and dreamlike. People's praise and people's criticism are not of any use. If just as if you would praise a stray dog saying that you're a great lion, the stray dog would not turn into a great lion, isn't it? And when you're facing failure, you should be very strong. When you hear praise from others, you should be very steady and not to be swayed by other people's praise. That is how to be a person. That is how to keep a balance as a person living in this world, in this secular world. You should then hold your own sovereign right. You should have your own ways of choosing right from wrong. And in such a way, you will live with great freedom. So we'll stop here today.